My name is John Thavis. I covered the Vatican for 30 years in Rome and 10 years after that. I'm the author of the New York Times best-selling book, The Vatican Diaries, and another book, The Vatican Prophecies. The sad fact is, in my opinion, the church has no official norms or mechanism for removing a pope who is incapacitated mentally or physically. And many people consider this a huge potential problem. If it's for an extended or indefinite period of time, who runs the church? Who's making decisions at the top of the hierarchy? Uh, Fortunately, at least for the modern church, that situation has never had to been faced. We have not had a pope slipping into a coma or being kept alive by machines. Well, they've studied it, but they haven't taken any steps. It was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, a group of church lawyers in Rome got together and they said, look, we're going to have to face this someday. Let's draw up some procedures so that if a pope truly is incapacitated, we'll have a process. It would kick in if the pope were alive but unable to govern. And so far, nothing has been adopted. So why not? I think an overriding reason is that people still fear it would diminish the Pope's authority by putting conditions on the office of the Pope, which, as you know, traditionally has been for life. There's a fear also of involving others in deciding whether a pope should be removed because, of course, it could be subject to manipulation. Who's going to determine whether a pope is incapacitated? What are the criteria? Is it going to be a committee? These are questions that are very difficult to answer, and the church moves slowly. Well, Pope Francis, very interestingly, a few years ago, said offhand in an interview that shortly after his election, he wrote a letter of resignation and handed it to a cardinal at the Vatican and said, here, if you ever need this, here it is. With the implication being, if I'm ever really incapacitated, you've got my resignation in hand. Well, obviously, this is a very casual way of doing things, typical of Pope Francis, but canon lawyers, church lawyers say that kind of a letter probably would not be valid. I mean, it's too haphazard. Where's the letter been? How do we know the letter is authentic? I'm a little bit surprised at how blunt they've been about the Pope's problems. Yes. The other day, the Pope, as you probably know, had a respiratory crisis, and it was touch and go. They were very clear he was in danger of losing his life, and he remains in critical condition. He's not out of danger. It's going to be a long recovery. And that kind of language is new for the Vatican. Even with John Paul II, when everyone could see that he had Parkinson's disease and was deteriorating physically, the Vatican tried to keep up a kind of charade that, oh no, he's governing regularly, he's fine. And the old joke among journalists is every pope is in great health until the day he dies. Well, this has changed. And I think the reason it's changed in this case is because of Pope Francis. The doctors who gave a press conference yesterday said, the Pope wants you to know how serious this is. In other words, he told them, tell the truth, don't sugarcoat this. And so that really is a new tone from the Vatican. We also have the possibility, of course, that a pope may die in a hospital. This would be for the first time in history. I mean, popes never went to hospitals until Pope John Paul II. the question of who is going to make end-of-life decisions, if those are required for Pope Francis, is up in the air. You know, first of all, you should know that the Catholic Church does, for example, allow the removal of life support in some circumstances, basically where death is considered inevitable and the treatment or life support would either prolong or increase the suffering to no end. So, in the case of a pope who's no longer able to make such decisions, the question becomes, who does make that decision? And I don't know too many people who'd want to be put in that position, number one. And we have no idea. The Pope may have foreseen this possibility and named someone. He may have a living will. If he has not made it public. And so we're left here waiting to find out. The Pope actually is still the Pope, even if he's in the hospital. A Pope can be Pope from the hospital. He could be in the hospital for months and still continue to carry out the duties of Pope. Although the question then becomes, well, if he's not totally incapacitated, is he impeded in some way that makes it really difficult for him to carry out those decisions? But in that case, the church still considers him the Pope, and there's no effort to remove him. And basically, he works by delegating his authority.
There is a Cardinal Farrell from Texas who is in a very important position.
Cardinal Kevin Farrell is the Camerlengo of the Roman Catholic Church. And you people, at least Catholics in Dallas, know him well. He was bishop there for several years. Mm-hmm. He's now in Rome. And the position of Camerlengo is extremely important if the Pope dies. If the Pope dies in the time before a new Pope is elected, the Camerlengo essentially manages the church. Now, he's not making key decisions. He's not starting new initiatives. He's basically keeping the ship afloat. But he's in contact with all the Vatican's economic entities. He's in contact with the communications people. And he also is the person who essentially manages the Pope's funeral and the meetings that take place after the funeral. So it's an extremely important position. My own thoughts are that after Pope Francis, who really was a pope who broke the mold. I mean, Pope Francis was in many ways revolutionary as pope. He went in a new direction for the church pastorally. He opened up new avenues of dialogue. He was a man of the people. And I don't think the cardinals are going to pull back and say, now we need a manager who stays behind the Vatican walls. But I think they're going to want a more moderate, let's say, a more careful, a more cautious pope, one who perhaps does not give interviews to journalists every other week, as Pope Francis has done. And of course, as a journalist, that would be rather disappointing, but I can understand why they would do that. Pope Francis spoke so freely and so often, and without any filters and without any Vatican minders looking over his shoulder or trying to edit his words. That was completely new. And I think we're going to see a bit of a pullback on those items. Predicting a conclave is not a good business to get into, because conclaves have been so unpredictable.